So the first storyteller tonight, Lily, taught me something about her experience that she's going to share tonight, that her sexuality does not define who she is, and that she is so much more than that. So I invite you to the stage, Lily, to share a story.
Thank you, Ashley. So I really love like dumb, cheesy romantic comedies. Like The Christmas Prince, I ate that up. Like, I love it. I probably wouldn't really pay to go see one in a theater, but I love just having it on in the background on Netflix and stuff like that. Probably about a year ago, I was watching one with my mom, and she asked me how I felt watching all these romantic movies with just straight couples, if it bothered me. And I told her that not really, because I was just used to it. Like, that's what there always was. And it's really easy for me to identify with these straight characters because there's pretty much unlimited options. There's never really been a character in the LGBT community on screen that I've really related to super well. Most of the films are independent, so they're harder to access, low budget, harder to find, harder to hear about. Most of the queer characters are supporting, not main cast, and the times that I've seen ones that I feel like I could relate to more, the characters are significantly older than I am. So I'd never really had the experience of being able to see myself represented really well on screen. And then the movie Love, Simon came out. So for those of you who don't know, Love, Simon is a coming-of-age romantic comedy about a gay high school student, Simon, and his coming-out experiences. It was the first movie produced by a major Hollywood studio to feature a gay teen protagonist, which is a really big deal. It's not my favorite movie ever. It's not perfect, but I will never forget the experience of being able to see that movie for the first time. For the first time, I was able to feel completely comfortable holding my partner's hand at the movies. I was able to feel safe doing this at the theater. And for the first time, I was able to really see myself reflected on like a big movie. So Simon is a gay man, I am not. But despite this, there were so many things about his experience I could really relate to. Like the anxiety over coming out, even if you know the people you're coming out to are gonna be completely supporting and accepting. And the feeling of the complete loss of control if you don't get to choose how and when it happens. There's a moment closer to the end of the movie after Simon has come out to his parents and he's talking with his mom and he asks her, "Did you know?" And she tells him that she knew he had a secret, but she didn't know what it was. And she says, "When you were little, you were so carefree. And these past few years, more and more, it's like I could feel you holding your breath." And that moment really stood out to me because that was exactly how it felt for me. Once I came to the realization that I was queer, I felt like I was holding my breath around my family because I was so scared of them knowing, of telling them that something would happen. And it was like holding my breath for so long that it was suffocating me. And then as terrifying as coming out was, it was like I could breathe again. So this movie does not represent every experience. It does not even fully represent my identity as a queer woman. But for the first time, I was really able to see my experiences represented on screen. And it made me realize how important it is to have movies that represent the LGBT community. And I would love for one day everybody to be able to go to the theater and see themselves and their experiences represented on the screen. So I actively searched for TV shows and movies that feature LGBT characters, specifically queer women. And it's interesting to me because I find it harder to relate to these characters. And I wonder why it's easier for me to relate to a gay man than a queer woman. And I think a lot of it comes down to the way female sexuality is often represented. I would say growing up, the majority of my experiences, the word lesbian was often associated with pornography. And I think that's why when I mentioned earlier about feeling comfortable holding my partner's hand, it's not just worry about outright homophobia, but also the feeling in the back of my mind that people are sexualizing an innocent act. As a woman, my body is sexualized for something simple like having my shoulders showing, something I'm doing for my own comfort, not for someone else to look at. Similarly, my relationship is for me and my partner, not for someone else's fantasy. But so often I've heard things like, "You're a lesbian? That's so hot." Or, "I'd love to see two girls kissing." Or people asking, "How do you have sex?" as soon as they learn you're a lesbian, despite not even knowing you. Just today, I learned about a horrible experience that happened in London, where two women were assaulted after a group of men asked them to kiss and they refused. It's so sexualized and so objectifying. And I think that's why I've really struggled with using the word lesbian to define myself. When you hear the word gay, often I would say the first thing that comes to mind isn't sex. I would say often the first word that comes to my mind, and I feel a lot of people's others, would be love. But I feel that with the word lesbian, sex is often one of the first things that comes to people's minds. It's a word that's been limited for so long because of these outside perceptions, and I think it's time for that to change. For a long time, I've really struggled to use this word for myself, but I don't want it to be a dirty word for me because it's not. Being a lesbian is so much more than my sexuality. It's how I interact with the world, the places I feel safe. It's what I'm passionate about, who I connect with, who I love. It's holding my partner's hand in public, even though I have all this anxiety about it, because really it makes me happy. It's about being who I am and being true to that. And there's nothing sexual about that. I am so much more than that. I am an artist. I love performing. I love the ocean and swimming, even though I'm terrified of sharks. There are so many more things about me. I'm still really struggling to use that word. Even now, speaking in front of a bunch of people and saying it is hard for me because of all this background that I carry with it. Because I still feel sometimes like identifying that way is wrong because of this, but it's not. It's not inherently sexual, and I think it's just really important for me to say that because I know I've spoken to a lot of other people who feel the same way. They don't feel comfortable using that word because it has been so over-sexualized, and relationships between two women have been so sexualized for so long. But I want to really reclaim that word back from just being a sexual thing because it's not. I want to take it from being simply sexual, because it's a core part of who I am. I am gay, I am queer, and I am a lesbian. Thank you.